Hello again, everyone. In last week's video, we made this key puzzle where you could unlock a door with the correct colored key. Although I mentioned on Discord that there's a potential bug with this system. The code that I wrote assumes something which may not always be true. Let me give an example. If I play the game and move the red key over to the lock, this should destroy the door. And pause. There we go, that works. But there's a possibility that when you're playing in VR and you pick up the key, that the key could become linked to something else. Let's take a look at that. Let's add a cube or sphere. Let's link the key to this. So I'll take the blue key and I'll link it to the sphere. So the sphere is now its parent. Let me just move the key. So let's imagine this sphere is the player's hand in VR. The player has picked up the key and is going to walk over to the door here. So I'll move the sphere over. And they're going to put the key on the door to try and activate the trigger. So let's do that. And then I'll unpause the game with Control-Shift-P. The key just falls, but it doesn't open the door. So what's going on? What went wrong? The code goes to the root of the transform, which means it goes all the way to the top. So if the key is here and I have a hand in the scene, let's add a cube. Let's pretend this is the hand of the player, right? The key enters the trigger and the code goes all the way up the hierarchy to the root node, which is the hand. But we're actually looking for this key here, and so it's going to miss the correct object. So I should change my code to say, instead of transform root, I should say transform parent. And that will go up just one step on the hierarchy, rather than going all the way to the top. Let's try it now. It's recompiling. Okay. Let's just place the key somewhere more convenient, like this. Move the ridiculously big hand back there. Where's my key? There. Okay, so I'll play the game and then pause it. And then I'll move the hand over so that the key is inside the door. Sorry, inside the lock. There. And then unpause the game. And this time it works, because instead of going all the way back to the root of the hierarchy, which was the hand object, it just steps back to this object and finds the correct key. So that was the bug I was talking about. Now, I also asked for requests on Discord for what you would like to see in this week's video, and there's a couple of requests for how to make a gun, and specifically how to make a gun that shoots bubbles. I think that's an interesting problem. It'll use scripts that are versatile enough that anybody can make use of, because you'll have to learn about instantiating and adding a force to a rigid body and things like that, which are very useful. So I'm going to do that today. So let's make an empty game object. We'll call this the gun. And I'll add some graphics to it. Let's just set it to 0, 0, 0. I'll add some graphics to it so we can see what the gun actually looks like. So let's add a cube. Make it a suitable size. Just duplicate this cube here. And I'll add a little cylinder for the barrel. Let's go 90 degrees. Let's see, I want to scale it down this way and back up this way. Okay, let's align all these with the bubble gun. So I'll link that to the bubble gun. And then that one. Actually, let's create an empty child, and we'll call this the graphics. And I'll link all of these to this graphics object. And that way, if we change the artwork, we can easily just turn this off and change it to something else very quickly. Let's set that to 0. Okay. That's my bubble gun. I'm going to add a script on this that'll shoot bubbles. Now, first of all, I'll make it just shoot simple bullets, and then we'll add the complexity of inflating a bubble and shooting out the bubble. Let's add a little locator to show where the bullets will spawn from. So we don't want the bullets to appear right here inside the gun. We want the bullets to appear there. So let's add a game object. Empty child. We'll call that the muzzle tip, which is where the bullets will spawn, and we'll put it here. And we'll check that its blue axis, its z-axis is forward, is pointing the right way, so that looks good. Now we'll need a prefab for the bullets that it's going to shoot. So let's make a prefabs folder. Let's create the bullet in the scene, and then I'll make a prefab out of it. So a prefab is an object that gets created while the game is running. So you need a special copy of it stored in the assets folder, and then it gets generated by the game. So first of all, I'll make the bullet. So let's create a sphere. Call this the bullet. And later I'll change this to be bubbles, but for now we'll just use a simple bullet. Let's make it a suitable size. We can add a material so it's easier to see. This red key will do. Now, I want these to have physics. I want them to fly forwards and fall under gravity, so I'll add a rigid body. In physics, rigid body. So this will make it fall. If I play the game now, the bullet will fall. And it'll hit the ground. There it is, it sits on the ground. Now let's make this a prefab so that the gun can create copies of it. So I go to the prefabs folder and drag it here. Now you see it turns blue. Blue means it's connected to a prefab. Okay, let's add the script to the bubble gun to shoot the bullets. So we'll create a new script. Oops, wrong one. Create a C# script. Done. Okay, let's edit that. So the gun will need to be able to create bullets, so we need a variable. Public rigid body, bullet, prefab. Now I've made this type rigid body because once we create the bullet, we'll want to add a force to it. And to add a force, you need to access the rigid body component. Update is the function in which you should check for input. So input can happen on every frame, so you have to check if it happened inside the update function. So let's use the spacebar to shoot the bullet. So I'll say if input.getKeyDown keycode.spacebar. Actually, it's keycode.space. I'll just put in a comment to say what's happened. We'll press space, so let's create a bullet and shoot it forward. So we also need to know where the bullet's going to get created, and that's the muzzle tip that I created. So let's make a transform. Now a transform allows you to access the position, so that's why I've made this variable transform. And public means it shows up in the editor. So let's create the bullet at the right location. So you say instantiate. We want to instantiate the bullet prefab. Okay, the next thing it's asked us for is, do we want to transform parent? Now, you notice this pop-up here has 2 of 10. There are 10 different versions of the instantiate function. If I use the arrow keys, I can go through all the different options. So one of them is this one. 3 is give me a parent. I don't care about the parent. Here's a good one. Give me the original object, give me the position, and give me the rotation. That's a useful one for us. So let's say that the position is the muzzle tip dot position, and the rotation, we don't want any rotation, so we say quaternion dot identity. That means no rotation. So that should create the bullet whenever we press space. Let's test this. Now, because I have made the bullet into a prefab, I don't need this one in the scene anymore. I can delete this one. Let's go to the gun, add the gun component. We have 2 variables. We have to find the bullet prefab, that's this. And we have to find the muzzle tip, where we're going to shoot from, that's this. Okay, let's play the game. I'll press space. Now space happens to be bound to jump as well, so it's doing a jump and it's shooting the bullet. Let's change the key. Let's change the key to use control. Keycode dot left control. Okay. Keycode is useful because it has it automatically fills in the name of the key. So if I want to know what the escape key is, I just hit keycode.es and there's escape. See, it fills it in for you with tab. So we're going to use control. Let's save that. So once again, I'll play the game, and this time I'll hit control. There's the bullets. Now they don't have any force, they just appear and fall to the ground. So let's now add a force to shoot them forwards. So we would like the player to be able to control this force, or at least the designer to control this force, so let's make it a public variable. So the shoot force will determine how fast the bullets go. So now, after I instantiate the bullet, I would like to shoot it forward. Now in order to do that, I need to save the bullet that the instantiate command created. So I say rigid body, new bullet, is equal to, then the instantiate command, but then at the end of it I have to say as a rigid body. So this means it will instantiate the bullet prefab as a rigid body, and it will save it into this new variable, which is type rigid body, called new bullet. So now I can access the bullet and do something to it. So I can say new bullet dot add force, for example. Okay, force is a vector 3, so it wants an x, y, z component. So I can simply say shoot it forward, which is the muzzle tip dot forward. So that's the muzzle tip dot forward is the blue arrow. Let's select the muzzle tip. Sorry, it zooms out a lot because it has no mesh. So the muzzle tip and its blue arrow is that way. So it's going to shoot it in that direction. Now, your transform forward is a vector of 1 meter in that direction. If we multiply that by a number, the vector gets longer and the bullet goes faster. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to take the muzzle tip forward and multiply it by the shoot force. So that stretches the vector out to be longer or shorter, depending on how big the shoot force is. So let's save that. Go back to Unity and give it a shoot force. Let's try 10. We'll play the game. 10 is obviously too small. So let's pause the game and try 100. Okay, still way too small. Pause it again, let's try 1,000. There we go. Now, seems to me like the bullets are shooting off to the side. Let's see what's happening. Let's zoom in here and have a look at what these bullets are doing. Well, they're hitting the table, I think. Okay, let me move the gun and see what they're doing. Okay. Okay, there they go, they're flying straight ahead. Now you'll notice that the scene is filling up with bullets, so every time I hit control it's creating a new bullet. If we look at the outliner over here on the left, you'll see all these bullet clones are appearing. Eventually, if you played the game for long enough, you'd fill the computer's memory and crash Unity, so we need to destroy the bullets after a while. So let's go back to the code. So we'll destroy the bullets after a few seconds so that the computer doesn't fill up with bullets. Let's try 5 seconds. So destroy the new bullet. Actually, we're going to destroy the new bullet.game object. The new bullet is actually just the rigid body. It's a part of the game object. If we say new bullet.game object, it destroys the whole thing. So destroy new bullet would just turn off the physics by destroying the rigid body, but the bullet would still exist in the scene. So if I say new bullet.game object, that destroys the whole thing. Okay, I'll shoot a few bullets and then we'll wait 5 seconds and see if they get destroyed. Now, I made changes to the bullet script while the game was running. You've got to remember that changes while it's running don't get saved. You've got to make your changes when the game is not running. Let's move the gun over a bit. Okay, and play again. So let's count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you look in the outliner, sorry, the hierarchy over on the left, see all the bullet clones over here? They'll disappear as the bullets get destroyed. Alright, so that's working quite nicely. So that's a normal gun. There was a request on Discord to have a look at how you might make something appear to be underwater, to change the physics to feel like they're underwater. Let's change the bullet prefab so that it has a very high drag. So if we go to the rigid body, which is here, you'll see drag is 0. So drag 0 means this moves at full speed and never slows down due to air resistance. So let's set that to 1 and then shoot some bullets and see what that looks like. So you can see they're curving and falling a lot sooner. Let's set that even higher. Also, I need to check that the floor actually has a collider. Where's my floor object? Floor plane. It has a mesh collider. The bullets should be hitting that. It's interesting. They seem to be falling through the floor, which they shouldn't do. Let's increase the drag on the rigid body to 5. See what that looks like. There now. So this is more like the behavior you'd expect in water. The bullets come out very quickly, but then the drag slows them right down and they fall. Now we could decrease the gravity too, or even increase the drag more. If we wanted them to fall more slowly, let's try a drag of 10. So now they come out, and now the drag is so high that they're even falling slowly due to gravity. If you wanted them to go further, you could increase the gun's bullet speed, is it called? Shoot force. Let's tilt the gun up a little bit. Let's increase the shoot force to 5,000. And let's increase the drag on the bullets even further. So let's have a drag of 20 and see what that looks like. Okay, so the force is much too high. Let's switch the bullets shoot force to 2,000 and try again. So now you see they're coming out very quickly, and then the drag is slowing them right down and they sink. So this is one way you could simulate underwater. You could also decrease the drag and decrease the gravity. That's another option. So I could go back to the bullet, decrease the drag a little bit. Let's just have a drag of 10. And I could also decrease the gravity, which I think is in the physics settings. So if we go to Window, edit preferences actually, edit project settings, and then physics. Yeah, here's gravity. So gravity is set to 9.81 meters per second in Y, which is Earth standard gravity. So let's go to half of that. Let's go to -4. And I'll just angle this view up so we can see where the bullets go. I think I'll just decrease the force on this. 1,500. Let's see what that looks like. And there, now they shoot out nice and fast, slow down quickly, and the slow gravity means they fall very slowly. So this is one way you could simulate your world feeling like it's underwater. Set a very high drag on all the ridge bodies and set a low gravity. Now don't forget, you can't change the behavior of the player. The player is still free to move around in VR, so you can't make them feel like they're underwater. But you can make everything else feel sluggish, like it's underwater. All right, now let's make the gun actually shoot bubbles instead of just ordinary bullets. Let's duplicate the gun. We'll remove the gun script from this one, and I'll create a new script for actually shooting bubbles. Let's create a prefab for the bubble. So we can use the bullet as a starting point. Let's rename this to bubble. I can break the prefab from this. So if we go to assets, go to, let's see, unpack prefab, there it is. So that disconnects this from the bullet, so they're no longer connected to each other. So this is going to be the bubble prefab. So if I drag that in here, we get a new prefab, and they're different. Where is it here? Let's create a material that looks more suitable for a bubble. So create material. Put it on the bubble. So we'll make this transparent first of all. So let's set the rendering mode to transparent. Change the albedo to have some alpha so we can see through it. Let's make it greenish blue. And let's make it really smooth and shiny. Okay, so there's our bubble. Now let's change the bubble gun. Let's just call this one the normal gun. That shoots normal bullets. This one is the bubble gun. Let's create a script for this. Oh, we have bubble gun there, okay. So I can copy and paste some of these. We're definitely going to need all of these variables in the bubble gun. Let's put these in here. So let's call this the bubble prefab. It'll still have the muzzle tip. It'll still have the shoot force. Now, we should also decide how big the bubbles can get. We can actually combine these onto one line. If you have multiple variables of the same type, you can just put them all in the same line. Max bubble size will have a speed that the bubbles increase. And the idea here is that when the player holds down the trigger, the bubble will appear and increase in size, and when they let go, it'll drift off and shoot forward. That should be all the variables we need, I think. Let's get this one to activate on the write control. So I'll say if input, get key down, write control. Oh, we need to do key code. Key down. Key code dot write control. There it is. So create a new bubble. Now, there's many ways to design a program. You can design a program by sketching out what you want to do. You could draw a flow chart. Another way to do it is what's called pseudocode. Pseudocode means writing out your algorithm in English, but writing it in a very structured and logical way so that you can then convert the pseudocode into C# very easily. So what I tend to do is I write a comment, which is my pseudocode for what I want to do, and then come back and fill it in later. So that will create the new bubble. Now, if they're holding down the key, we want to gradually increase the bubble. And if they've let go, we want to shoot the bubble off. So let's add in all three of these. If we say get key, now the difference between get key down and get key is that get key down gets called once on the frame when the user presses the button. Get key gets called every frame while they're currently holding it down. So this will get called once, will create the bubble. This will get called over and over and over very quickly every time the game updates. And then there's also get key up. So get key up will get called only when they release the key. So that's going to scale up, and this is going to release the bubble. So my comment is my pseudocode. I now have to convert this into C#. Now creating the bubble is going to be just like we did with the gun, so I can copy and paste this. But instead of instantiating the bullet prefab, we're instantiating the bubble prefab. So that creates the bubble. Now, I don't want this bubble to fall immediately. I want it to stay on the gun, so I'm going to parent it to the gun. Let's call this the new bubble. So I say set parent, and we'll set the parent to the muzzle tip. So it's now linked to the muzzle tip. Now we also need to make sure that it doesn't fall. Because it's got a rigid body, it's going to fall. So let's say new bubble dot is kinematic. It's true. And new bubble dot use gravity is false. Is kinematic means I'm going to use script to move this object, don't use physics. And use gravity false means it's not going to fall. So when we're ready to shoot the bullet off again, we'll switch these back off. So let's copy and paste these and to release the bubble. Actually, we're going to remove the parent too. So this will release the bubble. Let's set the parent to null. That means I have no parents. Now, I can't access new bubble in here. New bubble is only available in here because it gets defined in here. So what I really need to do is have the new bubble as a variable out here. Let's make a private variable. So I have a private rigid body, my bubble. Now when I define it out here, I can use it everywhere within the class. So instead of creating a new variable here, I'm going to change this to my bubble. So this variable can be used over and over and over. Every time we make a new bubble, it gets saved into this variable, and this variable is accessible anywhere inside the class. So this unparents it. Let's set kinematic to false. That means you can now use physics. Use gravity to true. Actually, since this is a bubble and it's supposed to float away, let's just completely wipe out gravity. Let's go to Unity and go to the bubble prefab. And turn off gravity. It should never really have gravity. We want this to float up in the air. So I'm going to turn off gravity on that. Okay. So that's creating the bubble and parenting it to the gun. That's releasing the bubble. We also need to shoot the bubble forward. So just like we did with the gun, we'll add a force. And we might want to destroy the bubble after a while too. So let's copy and paste this code. So this is called my bubble. And this is my bubble. And bubbles will be a lot slower, so let's let them stick around for 30 seconds. Okay, now the tricky part is scaling the bubble up to the max size. Let's ignore that for now. Let's test that this actually works, and then we'll worry about the scaling later. So let's test the code right now. So the bubble gun, we can take away the bubble prefab in the scene. The bubble gun needs to have its component added. The bubble gun. Okay, let's link up all the variables. The bubble prefab is this. The muzzle tip is the bubble gun's muzzle tip. Shoot force, we'll try a smaller shoot force so that they don't go as fast. Let's try 200. Now, max bubble size and the scale up speed, we're not using these yet. We'll use these when we're ready to scale up the bubble. Let's test if this actually works now. So press the right control button and the bubbles appear, and off they go. Now I think they've got too much drag. I think we've still got the drag from the previous bubble, from the bullet. So let's go to bubble, look at the drag. Yeah, the drag is 10. Let's set the drag much lower, 1. Play the game. Okay. I go to the bubbles. The shoot force is probably too high. Let's change the gun's shoot force to 50. Now, do they have any drag? They're drag 1, yeah, so 50 should be fine. Okay, very nice. Now the bubbles are drifting out. When they hit each other, they should push each other. Let's rotate this a little bit. There you go. We can add some random behavior to the bubbles later, but for now this is working. Let's now get them to scale up. So, scale the bubble up to the max size if they're holding it down. Okay, so what we'll do is we will get the current scale and increase it a little bit. So let's have a starting scale as well. Let's have a start bubble size and a max bubble size. And when the bubble appears, we'll create it at the right size. So we'll say my bubble.transform.local scale is equal to vector 3.1 times the start bubble size. So vector 3.1 is just a quick way of writing 1, 1, 1. And when we multiply by the start bubble size, let's say the start bubble size is 0.2. These will become 0.2, 0.2, like this. So instead of writing out all these numbers, this is just a quicker way of doing that. Unity has many vector 3s built in. You've got vector 3.0 for 0, 0, 0. You've also got vector 3.up, down, and right. So up is 0x, 1y, 0z. These are just shorthand ways of saving you from writing this kind of thing. So your scale is x, y, and z dimensions. So we have a scale of 1, we multiply by the start bubble size. So if the start bubble size is 0.1, we'll have a tiny bubble. If it's 1, we'll have a 1 meter bubble, which will be huge. Now, let's record. Let's see, we have the scale up speed. So let's increase the size every frame. So we'll say my bubble.transform.local scale is equal to, we'll make it slightly bigger. So we can read the local scale from x like that, multiplied by the bubble scale up speed. Now, this is going to happen every frame, and the game may run at a variable frame rate. We can't be sure what the frame rate is. So if we multiply by time.delta time, that removes the variation in the frame rate. Time.delta time is a very small number which records the time between each frame. And so if the game is running faster, this gets smaller, and your bubble scales up a little bit slower, which compensates for the speed of the game. Now, we actually can't just set the local scale to a single value. We have to set it to a vector 3. So what we'll do is we'll say vector 3.1 multiplied by my current scale multiplied by the scale up speed, which will make it bigger, multiply by time delta time, which will slow it down so that it increases a small amount every frame. Now we should check if we've reached the max size. If my bubble transform local scale.x is currently less than the max size, then we go ahead and we scale up. So if I've already reached the max size, it'll skip this line. It won't run this at all. Let's test that. Now the bubble gun needs a start bubble size. Let's have 0.1. Maximum bubble size. So let's make it get all the way up to 0.5 meter. And the scale up speed, I don't know. I don't know what this is going to be. What's suitable? It might be super fast, so we'll just try one. Okay, I'll hold down Control. Now it is creating a bubble, but I can't see them. What's happening? Bubble clone. It's shooting out here. Its scale is 0, 0, 0. So it's not scaling up. So what was my start size? Let's see. Start size is 0.1. Max size is 0.5. Let's make the shoot force smaller so we can see them. Perhaps this is too slow. Perhaps they're appearing with size 0. Let's see, the bubble clone, its scale is 0, 0, 0. So that's not working. Let's see what's going wrong. Shoot force, let's try 10. So we should start at about 10 centimeters. Let's put a bubble in the scene and check out what scale it is. That's a bullet on it. Oh, wait. Is that a bubble? Oh, I haven't added the material to it. Let's fix that. So let's create the material for the bubble. Yep, that's better. Try one. So that's correct. Now, oh yeah, I forgot to save this. So when you make changes to a prefab in the scene, you have to go to Overrides and Apply. This then saves the changes back to the prefab in the project. Now, what scale is this? 0.7. Let's see what it looks like at 0.1. So it should be big enough to see. And it's got a rigid body with no gravity. So that looks fine. Let's apply that scale. Let me check my code. Right, I think the problem is related to this. I think the bubble is getting created at the right scale, but then, because I'm holding down the key, this is going wrong. This actually is making the bubble become tiny. Because time.delta time is very small, the bubble is shrinking down to 0. I need to add the size. So instead of just multiplying, I need to make the scale bigger. So let's set the scale to the current scale. So say my bubble dot transform.x plus this. So this is going to say, get your current scale and add a little bit to it. And that should make it get bigger. So we take the current scale. We take the current scale, multiply by a little bit of an increase. We add that. And then we set it to multiply by vector 3.1 so it uses x, y, and z instead of just a single digit. Okay, now I might need to make the bubble scale up speed very big so that we can actually see it getting bigger. Let's give it a test. So right control. Now, okay, this is actually a reasonable speed. Okay, so they get bigger and then they stop. When I release the key, they push the previous one away, which is quite good. Let's increase the shoot force a little bit so that they move away. So shoot force, let's change that to 30. Okay. So you can see when I hold, if I tap control, we get a little bubble and it shoots it forward. If I hold down control, they keep scaling up until they reach their size, and then they shoot off forward. Now they might be nice if they had a little bit of gravity. Floating forward like that doesn't look very realistic, so let's go to the bubble prefab. Let's turn gravity back on. Use gravity. Let's set the gravity in the seam to be very low, maybe -2. And let's disable gravity when we create the bullet. My bubble.use gravity is false. And then when we shoot the bubble forward, we'll set gravity back on again. And this way they should shoot forward and then drift down nice and slowly. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, the gravity is too high, but it's quite nice. Let's just set the world's gravity to -0.5. There, that's good. Now they drift forward. They bump each other. And they slowly fall down. And they'll last 30 seconds before they pop. You could add some randomized colors, some randomization to the size. You could even add a script on the bubbles to give them a bit of random motion to simulate the wind pushing them around. That would look very nice, but that's enough for now. That's the basics on how I would do a bubble gun. In next week's video, we'll look at adding Steam VR input into Unity. Now, there's a very good tutorial on how to do this. This article here explains how to set it up, how to set up the Steam VR controllers, and then how to connect everything back into Unity. I'll put a link to this article on the canvas so you can read it yourselves. If you have a VR headset and you want to use Steam VR inputs, then follow this tutorial. Okay, see you all again next week on video. If you've got any questions on this, if you'd like to request anything, just hop on the Discord and let me know what you'd like to see.